Ya casi estamos, solo un par de minutos y ya vamos en vivo.
Sí, 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 perfecto.
Gracias. ¿Cómo vamos?
Bien, estoy entrando la línea a la página web.
Ah, muy bien.
Siempre va a haber ese eco.
Sí, quizás sí.
Tú lo vas a
Pero yo me voy a controlar.
Pero en los audífonos yo te digo unos
Sí, se escucha.
There's a very nice delay happening.
Yes. Lauri with reverb.
For dance.
Quiero hacer un par de pedidos.
¿Vos querés que yo hable?
Oh,
Peque. Pau chocolate.
Puro teléfono.
le rompes.
Es el del dedo.
Sí.
Ah. No, para si vas a sacar foto, me saco el sorteo.
Pero a ver, entonces una pregunta dirigida a ustedes, Ana, Ricardo y Lauri. O sea, solamente para contextualizar, los tres, ustedes tres como cofundaron el entresuelo o es sí, así es como
Sí.
está. Ok, perfecto. Solo para entender, porque en sus bios como que tienen, lo mencionan diferente, entonces, bueno, o sea, de alguna forma es un esfuerzo colaborativo que codirigen también.
Sí, exacto.
Ya, perfecto. Bueno, pues ahorita igual nos platican un poquito más.
Is the sound for you also cracking?
Yeah, let's.
¿Sí?
Para mí no.
Vivi, Nika, or Fifi, and Adomas. So also I just want to tell you guys, so I think the conversation is going to weave into between Spanish and English, just also because I think some people are not so confident in English, or they have expressed that they also would like to share in Spanish. So it's just going to weave in the both languages. And if you need translation from Spanish to English, just ask for it, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Igual si ustedes también, como les dije, que la conversación va a ir como entre español e inglés, dependiendo también su participación de ustedes, también la pueden hacer completamente en cualquiera de los dos idiomas. Si se necesitan que yo les traduzca algo de lo que nuestros colegas dicen en inglés, también yo con mucho gusto hago una pequeña traducción o como interpretación de lo puntual que van diciendo. Va a ir como entre español e inglés.
Chido, vale.
Dependiendo también su
Amigo, se escucha un poco
participación de ustedes,
raro
también
ahora.
la pueden hacer
Como de repente se va.
No, como con con ruido.
Algo de lo que nuestros colegas dicen en inglés,
Ah,
también yo con mucho
bien.
gusto.
O sea, todo bien, no
También,
hay problema.
Les voy a pedir solo que cuando hables,
de lo puntual que van diciendo.
Nos tomamos el micro mejor.
Dependiendo también su
Amigo, se escucha un poco
participación de
raro
ustedes,
ahora.
también la pueden hacer
como de repente se va.
No, como con ruido.
Como
Ahí ese está larguito. Entonces mejor ese. Bien. O sea, todo bien, no hay problema.
Les voy a pedir solo que cuando hables.
Creo que este está más larguito. A ver si pasa. Nos tomamos el micro
ok.
mejor. Amigo, es que
Ya podemos empezar, Ale, cuando
Ah,
quieras.
perfecto. Sí, es que se me fue la conexión, no sé por qué.
Sí, estamos
Ok,
listos.
bueno, o sea, voy a hacer las introducciones en inglés. Like, so I'm going to introduce to everyone bios in English as
Ya podemos empezar,
as
Ale,
mainly I
cuando
like to
quieras.
conduct
Sí, es
this
que
as
se
an
me fue la
English
conexión, no
speaking
sé por qué.
session, but then we're
Sí,
going to have
estamos
Spanish also
Bueno,
as part of the responses and the conversation.
So
So thank you so much.
introducciones en inglés.
Welcome to the last event
like,
of Radio
I'm gonna
Nopal,
introduce to
month
everyone
of performance.
bios in English
This has
as,
been
Ya podemos
all of
empezar.
mainly I
February,
like to conduct this as an English
amazing and
speaking
beautiful
session, but then we're gonna
encounter
have
with
a
different
Spanish-
personalities of performance art that have come and gathered around this table to talk and to share from their practice, coming from artists or producers and pedagogues of performance, to share basically how are we keeping this practice alive. And so today we have different personalities gathered, artists based between also Mexico City and then Berlin, and today, you know, I'm very glad to present Ana Zambrano, who's a dancer and choreographer and creator, working in the intersection between improvisation, performance, and visual arts, video, installation, site-specific. She distorts the boundaries of dance, considering the body as a space with a complex social history, questioning its use and symbolism as both individual and interactive levels. She also co-founded El Entresuelo in 2018, which is an autonomous space dedicated to the experimentation and exhibition of scenic and audiovisual practices exploring new languages. We also have Ricardo Daniel Rodriguez Rojas, who's a choreographer, video, theater maker, and artist also working with improvisation and installation, also an educator, and the co-founder also of Entresuelo. And Laura Abad, who's an artist from Argentina based in Mexico for so many years now, who's a performance artist and light designer, manager, and cultural producer. World of electronic cabaret, working with sound and visuals. A haunted ritual of some sort. Also, he's part of the creation of Akut Club and managing this Akut Magnoi Club new era of diverse events that aim to create safe environment and support marginalized groups by giving them stage and space in Berlin. So yeah, my name is Alejandro Chelet, and I'm the guest resident curator of Radio Nopal that has been invited. I have been invited to make this frame and to create this archive that we have been making in the last month of conversations. And so I have gathered a few questions, and you guys are all free to expand on these and to elaborate, to ignore the questions and to propose your own as well. But I mean, as an start, I'm just really interested. We are all working with our bodies, and I think we all have of our own inspirations coming from also elders. So my first two questions are, if you like to share, who do you consider your elders? If there is one that you like to talk about, and why. Could also be artistic elders. And also if you have any rituals for inspiration, and what would these rituals be?
Bueno, voy a empezar yo. Lo voy a hacer en español.
Perfecto.
Con mucho amor, pero no, que nadie se me agüite. Bueno, creo que mi máxima inspiración está puesta... bueno, no, primero voy a empezar como por mis masters, mis personas inspiradoras, que son casi siempre personas con quien colaboro, mis amigas, amigos, personas con quien he trabajado acá en la Ciudad de México, en otros países también. Por supuesto, tengo como otras máximas por todo el mundo, en la literatura principalmente, en el cine, pero podría decir y me encantaría decir que las personas que más me inspiran son mis partners, las personas con las que trabajo. ¿Todo bien? Ah, sí. Y si quieren nombres, después ya soltamos unos nombres, pero para no explayarme más. ¿Quieres traducir, Ale? ¿Y luego sigo o sigo?
I'll just make notes and then I'll translate to Fifi and Vivi and Adomas.
Y creo que hablando sobre los rituales de inspiración, creo que depende mucho como del contexto, es decir, como para qué tipo de proceso creativo yo me esté inspirando, pero ayer hablaba con Richie y con Lau y algunos de mis rituales de inspiración, uno de ellos muy importante, sobre todo cuando estoy a punto de compartir mi trabajo, tiene que ver con un tiempo y espacio específico para evitar mi soledad, estar a solas y vivir como un tiempo de calma antes de poder empezar cualquier tipo de proceso creativo, que creo que eso es muy importante. Y otro sería también el consumo, como el consumo de referentes que hacen de mi práctica como una práctica mucho más engordada, mucho más rica. Entonces, muchas veces cuando estoy a punto de empezar un proceso creativo, pues eso, me inspira mucho dibujar, como que el dibujo es un lenguaje que me funciona mucho para empezar procesos creativos y poder consumir un chingo de referencias también me ayuda mucho, me inspira mucho. Y otra muy importante es poder ir a ver algo, ya sea teatro, performance. Y esto es importante que no necesariamente de artistas con los que resuene, sino creo que para mí es muy importante también la experiencia como espectadora, como audiencia de otros procesos artísticos. Entonces, bueno, ahí para no extenderme más, le paso el micrófono al Richie.
A ver, voy a traducir nada más. So basically, Ana is sharing that a lot of her inspiration also comes from I mean, like her elders are also like partners, like I think in the general sense, of partners, people that she partners with, and her rituals basically are based in having time and space to be alone. Like her main ritual is to have a calm space before productions, as well as having a consumption of references before going into a production, and having also space to draw and just develop ideas and draw before producing work. Okay, Rich.
Hola, otra vez a todas. Yo no, ahora que hicieron la pregunta y que la vi en el correo, no la había pensado como algo que estuviera pensando últimamente, y eso es importante. Por alguna razón yo asocio esta palabra de inspiración que tiene sentido como a una necesidad productiva en el ámbito artístico, ¿no? Como, claro, como qué necesito hacer para inspirarme y como para estar con los sentidos suficientemente alerta para hacer lo que sea que tenga que hacer, para identificar cosas. Y entonces lo pensaba un poco más así, ¿no? Como tal vez en general toda la práctica artística y del cotidiano que día con día se va configurando es lo necesario para, claro, para poder tener como un estado como mucho más intuitivo, ¿no? O pensar como en entrenar la intuición más que como estar inspirado todo el tiempo. No sé, pensaba un poco en eso. Y en ese sentido, conectándolo con la otra pregunta de los referentes, para mí es muy importante el cotidiano, el día a día, como obviamente desde las personas más cercanas a mí hasta lo que está pasando en la calle. Me interesa en lo personal, incluso para estéticamente, desde mi perspectiva como artista. Para mí es muy importante pensar en eso, ¿no? En qué está pasando en la calle y qué conecta de alguna manera también con lo personal mío, ¿no? Al menos los últimos años he estado pensando más o menos así. Entonces sí, creo que todo tiene que ver, y me cuesta un poco pensarlo así, ¿no? Como de un trabajo constante de tratar de estar como perceptivo. Creo que eso para mí es muy importante.
So Ricardo is basically saying that his inspiration comes as a productive need in the artistic universe. It's also to be alert, to identify things, and look at things in the everyday life that configures with intuition. Also, like references could be the people close to him, what happened even aesthetically as an artist. It's important to him what connects at a personal level life in the everyday. I have there's feedback. Hay un ¿escuchan?
Yeah, but I think it's feedback with microphone. So maybe mute when other people are talking.
Ok.
De las computadoras, dice. Yo creo que es de la computadora. Puede ser. Creo que es del, sí, pero creo que ya sigamos, ¿no?
Sí.
Hace el micrófono.
Ok.
Dale, Adomas, si quieres.
This is the order? Or
No, there is no order. You guys.
You talk first, yes.
Hello, everyone. So first of all, thank you for inviting me for this. It's very exciting to be between so many beautiful creative people and have this conversation. Yes, I was like thinking a little bit about the question of ritual that you also talked about. So for me, it's actually, if I could use one word, it's loop somehow, because I find myself quite often looping in creative process, which is actually extended through amount of time. Since I've been doing music specifically, it's my medium, I guess. And these loops that keep on coming back, and I'm kind of drawn into them, but also kind of trying to avoid them. It's very often through connection to people themselves or creatives, also relationship to people. So sometimes it's very cathartic experience to re-feel these moments. And also they make me create also, which is a bit gift and a curse, I would say, because it's like keep on making you experience the same feelings, but trying to go out of it, but then reconnecting it, creating yourself a loop which actually inspires you if you don't feel inspiration. So this is my kind of, I think, word that could express, yeah, creative process and how I'm experiencing it. And elders, I would say it's will be quite simple answer, but I mean, my family is creative, so I found that's where all started basically, because they both come from music or like in theater world and stuff, and I think they were quite pushing me to do this and inspired me. At the same time, I feel creating the loop for me to be creative and pushing it towards, so it's all somehow connected. And also, since I'm also working about rituals a little bit, of course, church has very big influence on me as being a queer person, and abuse that is, you know, happening there and things. I think this is something that also really pushes me to look into emotionally how I feel about things and creating this songs, but also working with visuals with friends to recreate this kind of feeling and feel really emotional about things and assume hurt and yeah, and then looping in it.
Qué inspirador. ¿Voy yo?
George. Ay, qué fuerte. Ahí está bien. Bueno, ayer nos juntamos a pensar estas cosas, Anita, Rich y yo. Y en cuanto a los rituales, ¿qué? En cuanto a los rituales, en mi caso depende mucho del proyecto para el que esté trabajando. Me considero una YouTube junkie, así que el YouTube para mí es siempre como parte de mi ritual, de mi elder, de mi todo. Eso es real. Y hablando mucho con Anita ayer me hizo dar cuenta de que en verdad mi ritual tiene más que ver cuando desarmo. Como utilizo muchísimos objetos, hay algo del guardado cuando desarmo lo que acabo de probar, que tiene que ver mucho con mis rituales. Putting away things. Y en cuanto a mayores o elders, es algo que me cuesta pensar, pero creo que tengo la conclusión de que trato de pensar siempre en personas que estén vivas cuando busco referencias. Y bueno, mis amigos por demás, ¿no? Bailo igual que mis amigos. Ya. O como todos mis amigos.
Yeah, Lauri says that she finds a lot of inspiration from you, part of your people and elder, and then also she thinks of mantling as creation and mantling as a process, and she's concluding that her elder people who are also alive and who she draws from who are actually still alive.
Nice. I can talk about my rituals. So for me, it's sorry. This lag is really.
Yeah, can Andrés, can you mute the microphone?
Andres, can you mute on your computer when other people are talking? Oh yeah, okay, no, that's good. Sorry. Perfect, thank you. And thank you, Ale, for the beautiful introduction of everyone. For me, my rituals for inspiration kind of generally start within my body. So before I start going into a new creation, I always go into my studio or wherever I am at the time, and try to like go inwards within my body and focus on like grounding my nervous system, mostly using breath work and different exercises that I have to calm down my nervous system. Also shaking, because it's also a really good way to calm nervous systems and ground yourself. So yeah, mostly going into a studio and kind of a bit like what you were saying, Anna, making sure I have time for myself and calmness surrounding me to kind of get into my body, my breath, my nervous system. So that's kind of one ritual I use always when creating new things. And then another one for inspiration is more just observing, like going to maybe see a show or walking around outside or traveling, depending where I am, going into nature. Because I think you can find inspiration in the smallest detail of anything. So just kind of going into a mode where maybe I put on headphones and I'm walking and just really trying to observe and connect with what's happening around me and search for all the beauty in this world. And for elders, I would say I would mention Laura Stokes, who had a huge influence on me. She's one of my mentors. She's a hair hanger who just did a lot of really great things for women in circus and also like queer identities in the contemporary circus scene. So yeah, shout out to Laura Stokes.
Laura? Laura what?
Laura Stokes, Stokes.
Great. Well, I think everybody has shared now. No.
No,
Vivi.
I still have to share.
Yeah, Vivi, please.
Yeah, right. So yeah, thanks Alex again for introducing us and everyone else. Really excited to listen to you and to be here, even though in this hybrid form, which is also some sort of new form of ritual for us to be part of this new reality that we all kind of share right now. It's very strange for me to be alone in the room and it's always been strange since the corona, but it's still working. You're also alone and Fifi is also alone and you guys are together. And I'm looking at you at the picture with all of you together and I'm thinking, oh, this is so wonderful, you know? So this is the ritual of togetherness in a way, in a new age. That's really kind of fascinating me right now. But to go back a little bit at my practice, I feel very much inspired by everything that is natural. And if possible, also silence in nature. So if I'm before a project, I always tend to isolate myself, to go for a few days somewhere, and to just recollect. And I practice a lot of meditation, and I just do all the things necessary to just silence everything, silence my mind, silence my body, and then I can let anything new flow in. So this is what I do. And if I don't have the space, if I'm in New York or I don't know where, then I just go in a park. I just go and look at things. I just look at things and I try not to think about my project directly. I try to think about something else. I try to not think and let things come inside and actually just settle in. And I work with rituals, so I work with trance state. I work with bringing yourself into a state which is beyond the time that we know. So I call it a sacred time. I call it a time that you access to performance art that is a different kind of time. So in order to get to that time, I need to make myself, in a way, empty. So this happens days before I start to feel this energy coming in, the new one. So I let it come inside, and then once the performance happened, then everything kind of explodes. It reaches the climax, and then I can let go and move on to the next thing. So this is a ritual that happens all the time. It's a kind of like going out and coming back. So it's kind of a zoom out of yourself and a zoom in to yourself. And the inspirations are, I don't know, there are various personalities from literature, philosophy, visual arts, Sophie Calle, Lise Bourgeois. There's the Viennese actionisms. It's a lot. It's my mother also, who was a personality I never quite understood, but fascinated me as a child. It's her power. It's her insanity in a way, the perceived insanity from my side and also the world. Also being placed in a position of insanity and trying to understand what that is. It's the Eastern Orthodox mysticisms that I grew up with, so it's incorporated. Yeah, it's infusing me. It's still infusing me, and I work with that. I take it out and I transform it into my installations and my big scale installations and my performances. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Wow, thank you, gracias, for sharing this all of this context of you and how you inhabit your practice of, you know, becoming inspired and honoring other inspirations too. Y like ahora me muevo a la siguiente pregunta. I'm gonna actually ask in Spanish and in English, so just contextualizing. La pregunta es como, bueno, un poco es la idea de pensar en qué tanto ha cambiado la escena del performance como en relación a lo que ha pasado en los últimos 10 años o inclusive hasta 20 años. O sea, como what has been different, what has been the differences that have changed through the performance scene that we have seen or witnessed between like maybe the last 10 years or even 20 years. So like 2013 to maybe even 2003. Like, you know, I don't know, like what are the changes in the scene or in the way that we also, you know, present or produce or like workshop performance as well?
I mean, for me, thinking about this question, obviously there is very clear, you know, things coming up that definitely the tools that we're giving these days so much more than in the past. And I think there's like so many different art forms combining these tools that it are even born and like new things are coming up. So I think in time, that's a big difference also. Like different collaborations. I think people also, different artists have combined different art forms also for only, you know, one performance. Like I'm a musician, but I work with visual movement, objects, things. And I think for time, like the more tools, we're giving more perspective in that also. So that's the clear difference for me if I think about 15 years ago. It's
Bueno, lo que yo pienso es, no sé si tanto temporalmente, pero no, justo. Lo que sí creo que sigue es la indefinición sobre los límites o los bordes cuando hablamos de un hecho performático. Y sí creo que eso no ha cambiado más allá del tiempo que ha pasado desde que se empieza a nombrar de esa manera. Una llamada. ¿Quién sabe qué pasó? Pero fue genial para darme final.
So Lauri is saying about like that the change has been within the definition of the limits and borders of the performances. ¿No? Lo que entendí.
Bueno, yo coincido un poco con ambas. Bueno, lo digo desde mi lugar, presentándome como bailarín. Yo comencé en la danza contemporánea y sigo haciendo danza contemporánea, pero mi campo creativo ha crecido mucho, ¿no? En los últimos 10 años. Entonces, claro, como que ahora puedo considerar que se performea, se hace con el cuerpo desde muchos lugares, ¿no? Y es interesante por la expansión del género, creo yo, ¿no? Ya puedes escuchar performance y no saber qué esperar antes de llegar a ver el evento, ¿no? Lo que antes creo que sí era como más, claro, identitario de algo específico, ¿no? Eso.
Yeah, Ricardo basically agrees with Adomas and Lauri also in the perspective that Ricardo as a dancer looks at how his field, his creative field has grown within the expansion of the practice the having so many tools and having so much more things. And now when you are going to a performance, you don't really know even what to expect because there's so many more tools and things involved than 10 years ago.
No, ¿sí? Sí, la verdad que no, o sea, esta pregunta para mí es complicada porque me abre otras preguntas también, que eso está rico, como que creo que podría responder con otras preguntas. Igual coincido con Adomas, con Lau, con Rich, y pienso mucho más como desde mi práctica, que también considero mi práctica una especie de mancha, como un ejercicio que navega entre la danza, el performance, las artes visuales. Entonces, mi pregunta es también, que siempre ha sido, ¿no? Como qué entendemos todos por performance, qué entra dentro de la categoría de performance, como cuáles son los límites o los bordes. Y creo que en ese sentido coincido con Adomas, con Rich, en términos de que creo que esos bordes se han elastizado en términos estéticos, en términos también de cómo se usa y se simboliza el cuerpo. Se han elastizado, pero no siento que hayan cambiado porque de pronto para mí ver performance hoy día también me hace recordar mucho de referentes, que yo sí acudo a referentes de personas que están muertas. Entonces sí hay performances que definitivamente me hacen devolver en el tiempo y pensar en otras piezas performáticas que he visto, ¿no? Pero la pregunta me parece complicada. Diría quizás que la proliferación de la performance sí creo que ahora es como un medio que está muy en boga. Creo que tiene que ver tal vez también como con la necesidad incesante de todos de hablar y de decir a través de nuestros cuerpos. Y entonces me pasa eso, que otra vez repito que coincido con Richie en términos de que para mí siento que la idea de lo que es performance cada vez se vuelve mucho, se engorda cada vez más y que los bordes se vuelven cada vez más difusos. Y me gustaría mucho escucharles, porque para mí escucharles como, no sé, siento que aunque haya pasado mi turno de responder, después de escucharles hablar a los demás, me hace pensar en otras cosas que de pronto quiero sumar. Listo.
And Anna basically shares that, I mean, this is a complicated question because it opens many other questions. And as she considers her practice also being something that it's like, you know, like sort of elastic and kind of performance also, it's becoming this blurred thing that within its borders that have become just broader and very flexible. So in a way, the change that has happened has been that it's like nowadays it's has become performance more of a trend in also this like urgent necessity of using the body to express ourselves. And so the definition of performance has also grown and just become something which is kind of expanding in its own even more and more. And then she's also sharing that as you guys also are sharing and speaking, like she has so many much more ideas that she wants to share with us.
Oye,
Yeah, I can
Alejandro.
kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, perdón, es que de pronto esto del orden es raro, ¿no? Como que está bueno ir alimentando así la charla. Que decía que Alejandro lo haces muy bien, ¿eh? Que muchas gracias porque tus traducciones son muy buenas. Ya, solo quería decir eso. No, porque es una gran labor, pues, ¿no? Como poner en palabras y la traducción es una gran labor. Solo quería sumar eso, perdón.
Yeah, she's just complimenting my translation.
Important work.
Also, but
We
you
all
guys,
need
just let me just ask, ¿ustedes también con el, o sea, ahí tienen como asistencia para de inglés a español?
Creo que estamos bien. O sea, yo en lo
Ok.
personal entiendo el inglés y estoy bien con cómo está sucediendo la charla.
Pero ahí el Ricardo y la Lauri, ¿cómo están ustedes?
Yo hablo un poco inglés, pero creo que está chido eso también, como perder unas cosas y quedarse con como en
Bueno, pero
cualquier...
si no, igual, o sea, si no, entonces
sí,
ahí ya puede ayudar, o no sé, o sea,
No, está 100% chido por mí.
sí están bien, ok.
Va.
Ok.
Gracias, carnal.
Cool. Yeah, just going a bit off of what everyone just kind of said, I totally agree. I think the way that performance has changed in the last 10 years is just, yeah, a lot more input from many different things. And in some ways, I find this really beautiful. I think it like combines different communities that maybe didn't have as much conversation before time, like musicians and performance artists or visual artists and dancers or whatever, and also lets artists feel the ability or availability to be in more than one field, not just, oh, I'm a dancer, I can only dance, or oh, I'm a visual artist, I only do visual art, but that you can have these explorations and not have to stifle yourself in one thing or feel like trapped in one thing, that I think is really beautiful and allows us to have a lot of freedom of movement and community and connection with different types of artists as well, like within our own work, but then also reaching out to different communities and spaces that maybe we wouldn't have previously, which I think is really beautiful. On the flip side of that, I think it's also sometimes overwhelming to have so much access to so many different things and the ability to do so many different styles, and with how we use the internet and how we connect with people, that it's just a lot more available and at our fingertips. And sometimes I think, for me at least, like the performances I find more interesting or that I created are the ones where I had more limitations, or I had boundaries within it that like didn't allow me to have this full freedom of do whatever you want, combine with as many different art forms as you want, that nowadays is access and is also kind of popular to have many different mediums in a performance style. So it's kind of both beautiful and creates community and access to like lots of different things, as well as allowing ourselves to work in many different mediums. But at the same time, I also feel like it can be a struggle sometimes to have so much available and so much to work with, and then it can become overwhelming, and sometimes things get a little bit muted or just, yeah, drowned out somehow.
Yes, I can only agree with that. There's definitely so much to choose from. At the same time, I feel that events like Month of Performance Art in Berlin, there used to be a month of performance art happening every year, which would gather performance artists from all over the world. And you would watch performances that were very site-specific performances, but also there was less of any other external tools and media involved. And for me, that was great to have that in Berlin, where I'm also living. So this doesn't exist anymore. Also due to the fact that there's not so much funding for this kind of events. So I have the feeling that once you involve other medias and other forms, then you would get more funding. And visual artists are taken more serious, so to say, or if you're a visual artist and a performance artist, then you have a chance to get more funding. Or so I feel that's a shame, because the actual, I want to call it the pure performance art, I don't know, the legacy of the, I don't know what or not, but there is a certain form of performance art that I would say I'm interested in, and unfortunately it doesn't get so much funding. And I think this is a problem. It has changed now. I mean, there's more platforms. Let's 48 Hours Neukölln in Berlin gives us, there's more space for everyone to actually find a voice. But 2007, when I arrived in Berlin, it was maybe the last bits of the city as a stage, as Berlin used to be, or how I was imagining Berlin would be, where every place, every deserted house or apartment or any courtyard was a place to perform. And this is actually what brought me to Berlin, which was amazing, because I thought this is not possible. Stadt als Bühne, so the city as a stage. So this, I can say, in the last 10 years, 15 years has changed. There is more space, more institutionalized space for performance art, but it's less from that unique type of feeling where you get into a place and everything is performing. It's immersive. It's alive. It's like it's made with the heart. And it's just like, I'm not talking about money here. I'm not talking about funding. I'm talking about just a special way of feeling when you know something is pure. The person performing in front of you is very much there, and there's nothing else beside that. It's just you and that. and there's a bridge, and it's wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, on the other hand, yes, maybe there's more funding nowadays and more support. There's Performing Arts Festival now, but it's probably going to end also because they didn't get a big funding next year. Yeah, let's see. I'm curious how it's going to evolve.
Just going off what you just said, Viviana, or do you want to translate first, Alejandro? Okay, just going out what you said, Viviana, I totally agree with you, and like how Berlin has changed and these spaces have changed since the last 10 years or even longer. But I think it's also like a cause of, okay, everywhere used to be a stage as well, which was beautiful, but there are also all these like very, very small underground spaces that, you know, didn't even have a toilet or like whatever, and there were constantly performances and things happening within them. And even just since the pandemic, like a lot of them closed down or couldn't continue to exist. So I think that the way that performance is existing, at least in Berlin, is going more and more towards these like bigger venues or funded spaces and these like underground warehousey spaces. They still exist. There still are projects and things popping up, but a lot of these spaces have like died out, and there's more of a like rise from the underground coming more into the mainstream that I think is in some ways interesting and good, because I think it brings like more radical ideas to the mainstream, which is good and important, but then also sad because you're losing all these like underground beautiful spaces that used to exist in Berlin.
Yeah, bueno, ¿quieren compartir algo más?
Sí, yo quiero decir algo. Bueno, que me hicieron pensar. En la definición de lo que trataba de pensar al principio, como siento que es como una bolsa grande donde entran muchísimas otras cosas y eso a mí me hace preguntas. Y en cuanto a lo de si era radical o underground y ahora está como mucho más institucionalizada la performance de algún modo, como que me hace pensar exactamente en eso. Y entonces vuelvo al principio donde se pierden los bordes. Al final, no sé, arte-acción o lo que era mucho más punky o un montón de cosas ahora están dentro de una bolsa más grande, creo, que es el performance o la performance, ¿no? Como que siento que es como a veces una pregunta de definiciones. Eso y que no sé si es importante contestarla, simplemente que me hago esa pregunta.
Yeah, I think Lauri is mentioning also kind of in relation to the next question, which I was about to ask as well, but I mean, we're going to go into it, but she's basically talking about how this definition of performance has now come into this kind of big bag. And it just basically, it's to fit everything into one single thing, that it also includes what used to be called it's called the radical or the underground. But is this like in the performance world now, the performance is kind of more institutionalized and it's more institution related. And all of this punk or action art are now all like sort of bagged into the same thing.
Yeah.
Ana?
Sí, hola. Después de escuchar a Vivi y a Nika, nada, como que me surgen las preguntas, o sea, con respecto a esta idea de que la performance está cada vez más institucionalizada, no podría decir que no, pero también creo que es importante como preguntarnos, también respondiendo a lo que comentaban antes, como cuáles son esos escenarios donde sucede la performance y cuáles son esos escenarios que nosotros conocemos, porque creo que de pronto, sin darnos cuenta, nuestra mirada, digo, hablo desde un lugar muy personal, nuestra mirada puede estar acortada en el sentido de realmente conocer o desconocer en dónde está sucediendo esta práctica. En ese sentido, para mí es importante cuestionarnos eso, como cuáles son esos escenarios y cuáles son las personas, agentes que están llevando a cabo esta práctica, desde qué lugar, desde qué discursos, porque en ese sentido es que decía antes, ¿no? Como que creo que hay una proliferación muy cabrona en términos, muy fuerte, pues, en términos de, no sé, quizás 10 años, 20 años, y que considero importante tomar en cuenta todos estos todas estas prácticas que no entran dentro de la lógica institucional, o sea, como poner atención a ello, porque está sucediendo, realmente está sucediendo, o sea, y como hay una escena under importante y que quizás no se manifieste en este tipo de espacios, que pues su naturaleza va de eso, ¿no? Como de permanecerse un poco como en los bordes de, repito, como de esa lógica institucional que expone o exhibe desde esos lugares la performance. Entonces, bueno, solamente eso, como cuestionar cuáles son los escenarios donde sucede, cuáles conocemos, cuáles desconocemos y quiénes son las personas que acuerpamos la práctica de la performance.
Anna is like making this point about, I mean, she's like basically also agreeing with what Lauri says and kind of also asking sort of what are those stages that performance happens these days? And also, how do we know where this practice happens? As like, how do we get to know where these performances are happening, and basically who are making these performances, and what are the discourses that are involved in these pieces? Kind of like mentioning that it's important to take into account all of the other stuff that is happening sort of within the edges of the outside of the institutions, and sort of looking that, you know, referring that there is still existing practices and artists or practicing artists that show of institution, and sort of who and how and what discourses are those, and what are they speaking about, and also understanding that they may also want to still sort of become and still be outside of the institution within its edges. But let me actually I'll do the question. I mean, like, let's just jump right in. I mean, we are in it already, but I'm just asking, my particular questions is like, okay, wait. Like, if there are any patterns that you can observe, so like patterns, right? Things that repeat within the formatting of the performance inside the art world, the art market, or the subculture, edgy, underground counterculture, if there is something that exists. I mean, some of you are saying that it is a reality. I think other people have also shared in other talks that there is no such thing as edgy or counterculture. I don't know. So, entonces un poco la pregunta es eso, ¿no? Como cuáles son los patrones que encontramos y que podemos observar en el formato del performance dentro del mundo del arte, dentro del mercado del arte y de la tal subcultura como contracultura, underground, ¿no? O sea, si es que esto existe. O sea, mi pregunta es como, ¿qué tanto son esos patrones, es la similaridad que existe en cómo se formatea el performance en esos dos ámbitos? Si es que existen esos dos ámbitos, ¿no? Digo, hablamos we were talking about between like Berlin and Mexico City, and then, you know, like Viviana is also sharing about like, and Fifi about how Berlin has sort of been starting to get cleaned out of this creativeness. But maybe is Mexico City experiencing something like that? Or I don't know, you guys are very active in Mexico City scene. Maybe you can like share about that. And Adomas also maybe want to share about how you, well, we'll go into like also having a space in the venue in the next future questions also, but I don't know.
I think for me, it's also going to another question of creating the spaces and actually leading spaces that preserve this underground culture still, you know, and I think most of us have those spaces and trying to do this work. So, but continuation would be, I think, about previous question.
No sé, ¿ustedes quieren decir algo?
O sea, del entresuelo es lo que podría hablar.
No, pero los patrones que existen entre lo underground y el performance en el mercado, en el arte, si existen patrones que son similares en el formato de cómo se presenta el performance. Esa es la pregunta. Y ahorita ya vamos a los espacios.
De nuevo, ayer discutíamos con mis amigas algunas de estas cosas, y quizás es una pregunta que creo que viene más adelante, pero no importa, es lo que me hace pensar ahora.
que es como, por ejemplo, no sé, hay algo, no sé si tiene exactamente que ver con los patrones, pero pensábamos en esto de la performance para la foto o la performance para el registro, ¿no? Como cuando importa más lo que se va a vender en la red social que lo que está sucediendo en el hecho vivo. Y no sé si eso está bien o mal, no estoy poniendo un juicio de valor, o quizás sí, pero... No, bueno, pero es, o sea, creo que es cada quien, decisión de cada quien, y eso no me importa, digamos, pero bueno, pensaba en eso, como quizás ya está siendo pensado para en verdad el registro y en vez de lo que está sucediendo en el hecho vivo. Eso es lo único que puedo pensar como patrón. Sí. No sé si está bien dentro
No,
del...
no, no, that's great. Está perfecto. Lauri is basically saying, you know, maybe something that she identifies that it's something happening within these spheres is that performance is now sometimes fought. Even just how is it made for the photo or the video live feed or the Instagram, or when does it becomes a matter more for the visual than for the actual audience? You know, how are we even thinking of these performances to be even thought of seen for a camera than more of an audience, right? And that's kind of one of the patterns that she identifies that exist in these two spheres.
I would also like to share a thought about this. So what I've noticed in the last years, especially in the Romanian scene, of work shown in the Venice Biennale, where performance is being booked, so which is a great thing. Yeah? So instead of showing paintings, you are booking a performance art, you're curating a performance program. What you have there is a choreographer, basically, who is choreographing bodies. Performance artists are getting a job to perform for Venice Biennale, being paid, which is a great thing. But all in all, a choreographer and the performing bodies is also in a way. I'm having feedback like someone's microphone is still on. No, okay. So this is the format that I've been noticing, not only in Venice Biennale, maybe yeah, kind of.
I think you guys need to mute again.
Now
Yeah.
we mute, actually.
So in a way, this is an accepted format that is running in big institutions and getting funding for. And on the other hand, you have, let's say, the work Sun and Sea, which is also bodies performing with an installation in the Lithuanian pavilion. So yeah, there's certain formats that are functioning, and I don't know. I'm not saying I'm judging the work. I'm commenting. It is of course a different format that
Wait.
yeah.
No, this is happening again. I don't understand.
I don't. I also yeah.
No, I mean, I think these guys, you need to mute the actual poll. Yeah, that's what you need to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's the Romanian pavilion, choreographer and performing bodies, and let's say the example Sun and Sea of Lithuanian pavilion. These are two examples of works that are successful and functioning. On the other hand, you have so much on the other scene, so many artists there. At least what I observe in Berlin, there is no actual scene for it. There is so much need of spaces. There's so much need of events, specific events. That's why I started curating this event, Urban Witches, Not Bitches, which encompasses performance art. And this is the main point. This is why I actually do it, because I want to incorporate performance art and visual art. So there is a laboratory. It's not a pin-up event. It's not something fixed to the wall, but it is a laboratory. Also, the visual art is a laboratory, and then the performances also activate the spaces, basically. So yeah, that's what it's. The second edition happened now in December and January, and I'm gonna do it again definitely. and next time, hopefully with more support. So yeah, these are my thoughts.
Perdónale.
Queríamos saber, Ale, si nos puedes compartir. Es que hubo un poquito de fallas técnicas acá y en lo que se solucionaba nos perdimos un poco de lo que compartió Vivi. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí, sí,
Gracias.
Viviana compartiendo sobre también como su práctica curatorial en Berlín, creando un formato y un espacio para artistas también de Rumania, pero también de Europa del Este, que tienen prácticas diversas, sobre todo también incluyendo performance, y que bueno, que un poco como su forma de contribuir a esta, digamos, al performance también ha sido ahorita como crear esos formatos ya desde varios años, donde va incluyendo pues como investigaciones de artistas que se relacionan con su práctica de su identidad también, como artistas de performance, y sobre todo también con contexto de Europa, de Europa del Este, ¿no? Como centralizando también su identidad sí, más o menos eso es en grandes rasgos. Yeah. Okay. Maybe should we move on to the next question, or somebody wants to continue sharing about these? Ana?
A ver, creo que sí. O sea, como que sigo pensando otra vez en esta idea de cuáles son los escenarios y las personas que acuerpamos la práctica de la performance. Y sigo pensando que quizás, no sé, una tendencia que yo noto como muy latente cada vez más desde lo personal, pero también desde las personas con quienes colaboro, es, y me parece un tema muy importante también, me parece que es difícil, o sea, misma yo soy crítica de las lógicas institucionales, estoy muy en contra, pero eso no significa que esté fuera de esa lógica, porque, y digo que es tricky porque tristemente muchas veces es necesario para que la práctica de la performance, para que tu trabajo, mi trabajo se posibilite, muchas veces es necesario, indispensable acceder a esa lógica institucional. Incluso cuando no estás de acuerdo en cómo articula, o incluso cuando esta lógica no resuena con tu proceso artístico, creo que a veces una tendencia que identifico, digo ahora como en mi contexto en Ciudad de México, con las personas con quien me relaciono, es como este vaivén y esta duda, este cuestionamiento con respecto a cuáles son los lugares que posibilitan la presentación y la divulgación de nuestro trabajo. Y tristemente, pues casi siempre son los espacios institucionales. Nosotros tenemos este espacio que se llama el Entresuelo, que hace parte de la escena under y que luchamos y abogamos porque siga vivo, y me encanta que sea un espacio clandestino, etcétera. Pero es verdad también que tiene sus pros y sus contras, ¿no? Porque el hecho de que sea un espacio que articule más desde esta lógica que está fuera desde lo institucional, también coopta en muchos momentos posibilidades de divulgación y posibilidades incluso de sustentabilidad económica, ¿no? En ese sentido, creo que esa sería una tendencia o una pregunta importante en términos de cuestionar y de criticar también, ¿no? Como cuáles son esos espacios posibles para presentar nuestro trabajo, pero también cómo nuestro trabajo en ese sentido es remunerado. Y creo que por ahí había una pregunta tuya, Ale, con respecto a eso, que tiene que ver, según yo, como más con el proceso creativo, como cuáles son estas dificultades o ¿cómo era la palabra en español? Los desafíos a los que nos enfrentamos dentro de nuestra práctica artística, y yo creería que quizás podemos, bueno, no sé, no quiero ser la moderadora, pero pasar a esa pregunta un poco en términos de que sí es verdad que no seguir o no hacer parte de esta lógica institucional o estar todo el tiempo, hablo desde un lugar muy personal, en este vaivén de sí quiero, pero no quiero, pero sí necesito estar ahí porque es el único espacio que permite que mi trabajo cobre otro sentido en términos de alcance. Me parece que es un punto importante, pues, como para abrir, porque claro, voy para cerrar. Mi trabajo o mi práctica siempre está peleada con la lógica institucional, pero también al mismo tiempo mi trabajo está en esos aparadores, ¿me entiendes? O sea, en los museos, en las galerías, etcétera, etcétera. Entonces, como que creo que yo pensaría que es una tendencia un poco también, sí, súper política de decidir cuáles son los lugares que acogen nuestro trabajo. Ya, me callo.
Okay, so Ana is basically saying sort of like how this is this sort of tendency that it's like, in a way, like sadly, it is today necessary that for performance to exist, it's like it needs to be attached to access to the institutions, and sort of like, you know, she finds herself, in short words of everything that she says, she finds herself basically kind of like back and forth, you know, in between this questioning of what are the spaces that make it possible to distribute and show our performances, as meaning basically like, you know, like also coming from creating this entresuelo venue in Mexico City that sort of belongs to the underground scene of performance, but it's like, you know, still having these questions of like how to keep it going, you know, how to reach economic sustainability, and sort of how not just as a venue founder and promoter and producer of other artists' work, but also personally, internally, as in her own practice, how to keep her practice going sustainably, economically as well, and this like sort of, you know, being basically in the in between of having our work being funded and being paid, but also belonging to a gallery, belonging to an institution, but at the same time running an alternative space for other artists on the ground, and existing within these two worlds. And it's just this questioning on also like, in a way, you know, affirming that this is how we're doing it, but also questioning it is like, how are we going to keep doing it? In a way that's and then I think we can like continue on, obviously, onto the next questions that I prepared for you, which is, in a way, I mean, you know, what's the motivation? I mean, I'm also curious, what is the motivation for you guys, specifically also the ones that, you know, the ones you guys that have a spaces, but also you guys that create curations, that have a company that present shows in different venues, that you create curate other artists. What is the motivation behind this want, you know, to create a forum, to create like a framework or a foundation for performance, and also opening up a particular venue, or, you know, or creating your own space within a venue? What is the motivation? Like, what, you know, why do you do that? Why are you not only doing your performance practice and just calling it your individual thing? Why do you want to share space for others?
You go, Vivi.
No.
I just want to jump back a little bit about what also Anna said, and like about this circle about getting fundings to run something, and then like spaces, like for example, I run a space which is quite small. So for creatives to do actually self-funded events, they have to do door, then artists are normally not paid, and then they have to apply to fundings to actually be properly paid. It's all this circle of like things. And for underground places, it's very hard spot to be, as somebody who's running like a club. Actually, it's crazy. I see people coming who wants to do self-funded event. Creatives actually very often performance events, running into club night and things, and it's extremely hard to actually get anything out of it in the end. Actually, it barely comes clean, you know? It's like most of the time underpaid, people working for free and things. And then, of course, artists are finding themselves to apply for fundings to make this kind of events. But then you also set to the rules that fundings are asking you to be also, you know, then all this tokenism, what is hip now, what is like, you know, important. In Berlin, it's also became a thing, you know, it's like, it's very hard actually to, you know, run something without getting fundings. And, you know, at the same time, when I think also this, you know, being in the spot which you're kind of blocked can actually open very creative fields also for people, you know. So it's also gives food actually for creativity. But as somebody who's running a venue which is club and actually very interested also most time in events which are mixed media, you know, so it's going from performance to a club night and things. It's like, yeah, I think without fundings, it's barely feasible. Simply, you know, it's very hard spot.
I think the main reason we actually still do that, and we still do is actually community. And without community, I mean, it's what are we doing? I mean, we're trying to configure something like this. And I mean, there's big festivals in Berlin. There's like CTM, Transmediale. It's a community. You know, it's a community of people that started this thing, and it was very small and it became very big. And you know, we notice when it has a good sustainability or a good, let's say, a good ethics behind, and then it's great to see it grow. And underground can become something which is less underground, but it's still underground at its core. And I think the core underground has to stay underground. And has to stay militant and revolutionary, right? Because if not, then what are we doing? Yeah, so we need to create events, we need to create platforms, we need to support our community. There's people flying over from different places to be part of this community, and there's a gathering of people that exchange ideas. And without this gathering, physical gathering, please, if possible, because there's so many limitations in the non-physical, right? But it's still, I mean, it's still doable. And Corona did this experiment with us in a way, so we're stepping into this new age now. So yeah, it's very important. That's why we do it, and it's for community. Yeah.
Yeah, also just what you were saying about like how spaces have changed in terms of like needing like club nights needing funding to be able to do anything, or for artists to be able to be paid. I feel like Berlin in the past, you could run events even in really tiny club spaces, and because the city was cheap and like, you know, you could still pay artists like a decent wage and throw events and self-fund and not have to worry about like institutions or funding or anything. And I think because of like inflation and the pandemic and everything, this is just changing. But something that I'm like extremely worried about if we're needing to run all these events with funding only, specifically towards funding in Berlin, but something that is now happening within funding and art in general in the art world is a lot of censorship surrounding any sort of like any event or any art night that has any sort of like free Palestine rhetoric surrounding it, that like institutions are defunding places. Like for example, Oyun, which if you don't know Oyun, it's a BIPOC space that was funded by the state previously and was recently just defunded because they created an anti-Semitic night when it was actually a Jewish organization running a night that was supporting Palestine and was critical of the genocide that's happening right now. But anything that is like, yeah, critiquing this, or any institution that has even the stance of Free Palestine is not getting funded and is being completely censored. So that's something that like, okay, we're creating all these spaces that are surrounding like community and wanting to bring people together, but then how does that apply in the future if we can only run events with funding, and we have to be censored to be able to create those events. So this is something that I'm kind of like worried about in the future, and wondering like if we're relying so much on institutions and institutions are censoring us to such an extreme level, then like where do we fall in terms of like what we're going to do with our performance art?
¿Quieren compartir?
Sí, bueno, para mí esta necesidad desde el principio tuvo que ver con poder tener acceso como un espacio mucho más, pues sí, accesible económicamente para nosotras, para poder trabajar y para poder ofrecer el espacio a otras personas, ¿no? Lo cual el espacio sigue manteniendo como esa misma espíritu, ¿no? De que cualquier persona que se acerque y quiera sumar su práctica o ser parte del espacio realmente es muy accesible en relación a la lógica del mercado de espacios para el cuerpo que hay en la ciudad. Y poco a poco creo que el espacio y el devenir ha ido construyendo también eh, como una comunidad muy fuerte, ¿no? Que es propia de nosotras y que también se está conectando o se sigue conectando con otro tipo de prácticas artísticas, ¿no? O de gente que las construye. Y en ese sentido creo que está chido como dar cuenta que somos como parte también de esa expansión o no sé cómo llamarla, de la performance, ¿no? Hacia otras prácticas artísticas. Bueno, eso, quería decir eso que es importante en cuanto a la comunidad de entresuelo, ¿no?
Yeah, Ricardo is sharing that, he reflects on how important it is to have access to a space. And in a way, by creating Entresuelo, them as a collective have now afford to be able to work and offer this space to other people who also would like to be part of this community, of this project. And sort of like slowly, like bits by bits, the space has created a strong community that has connected with various artistic practices beyond performance that also build the space itself.
Buenas tardes.
No, bueno, yo
estamos
pensaba
aquí.
que nosotros somos autogestivas, ¿no? Nosotros no tenemos ningún tipo de apoyo ni subvención del Estado mexicano. Y creo que eso es importante de decir. En México no abundan los lugares autogestivos y para nosotras es un poco bandera. No sé si, sí, creo que es un poco bandera. Y bueno, para mí es súper importante, bueno, además de ser mi estudio de trabajo, la comunidad que se arma en Entresuelo es una cosa demasiado hermosa. Y en mi vida particular, esto es completamente personal, era un sueño para mí tener un espacio creativo. Y donde yo crecí, en Buenos Aires, justo lo que pasa es que lo que más hay son lugares autogestivos, porque casi no existe la subvención del gobierno. Entonces, bueno, remar en dulce de leche o todas hacemos de todo es algo que de donde yo vengo es como lo que más pasa. Entonces, de algún modo, para mí, no sé cómo explicarlo, pero sí, lo mamo. Lo encuerpo, lo vivo así, no puedo pensarlo de otra manera, digamos. No podría ir a ejercer un solo rol al espacio donde yo trabajo, ¿no? Yo solamente me ocupo de, no sé, siento que es algo circular, todas hacemos de todo porque queremos que esto sea, que esté vivo y que funcione y que sea hermoso. Entonces, no sé, entonces, y eso creo que la autogestión y llevar adelante un proyecto más allá de cualquier adversidad o no tener apoyo gubernamental, de algún modo, no sé, sí, lo hace más humano. No sé, algo así.
¿Quieres traducir, Ale, y luego ya sigo yo? ¿O podemos dejar que siga alguien más?
No, está bien, traduzco. So yeah, Lauri is basically saying like how this space of Entresuelo, how you guys are like actually self-funded and like in a way in opposition to sort of what it's more common in Mexico as a country that has not so many of these spaces. Like there are not a lot of these kind of venues, in comparison to Buenos Aires, where Lauri comes from, where where there is like loads of these kind of venues that are alternative and self-funded. But in a way, like what's important for Lauri is like how, you know, it's like, for her, it's like structural to have a multi-specificity of roles, you know, in this like sort of circular responsibility that is shared with the peers to basically bring a project more, bring this kind of project of a venue closeness to humanity.
Bueno, ya para cerrar esta pregunta, ¿no? Quería decir que, o sea, que la pregunta que hacías al final, Ale, para mí, o sea, creo que lo más importante o la necesidad incesante de poder crear este tipo de espacios es la necesidad de hacer multitud, ¿no? De generar redes locales. Me parece muy importante este espacio también, pensando en términos de cuáles son las redes que estamos generando juntos, más allá o fuera de esta lógica institucional, cómo empujamos ese deseo de crear espacios que estén hechos por nosotros, para nosotros. Y no perseguir siempre o tratar de remoldear una lógica que ya está hecha, una lógica que cumple más con necesidades estatales, institucionales, sino crear esos espacios que se van creando, que se van formulando mientras se hacen, y se hacen a partir de las personas que los acuerpan, que los acuerpan, que los habitan. Entonces, para mí la necesidad es esa, empujar sobre ese deseo, y empujar no a solas, sino con toda esta gente que está teniendo la misma necesidad que yo, y el mismo ímpetu y la misma forma de hacer, ¿no? Creo que eso sería como súper importante, la necesidad de hacer multitud, de hacer manada, pues.
Yeah, and then I mean, and Anna basically, you know, adds with how there is this need to make a crowd, as a crowd that creates a network, a local network, and then inhabiting this container, having the wish to create spaces for us, by us, and spaces that are shaped by the people who are inside this container.
I think also there's such importance of community in building bridges, even what we're doing now, actually. And it's quite amazing, you know, between Berlin and Mexico, and creating this, like, you know, safe spaces for people to just perform, you know. I find this quite beautiful. So thanks again to invite actually me.
You want to say something, Fifi? No. No. Okay. So I mean, okay. Thank you. So we can continue moving on. I mean, you know, we have talked about these sort of challenges already. You guys have mentioned challenges beyond funding. We have talked about censorship. We have talked about like sort of our own way of existing as just not sort of only individuals as artists, but existing in a collective, thinking that, you know, our practices are also existing within this collective. And I'm just curious, I don't know, also, you know, maybe you have thought about this, you work on it already, but some artists don't do much of it. But like, what is your personal take on archival of performance work? Like, do you believe that archiving, you know, the different shows, the different club nights that you have, do you think that this is also part of, you know, how are we involved in creating or like preserving an archive, you know, like sort of what, you know, something that will also talk to the future, you know, it's something that's happening now but we are like recording it, we're like sort of keeping it, preserving it somehow for it to be useful later or useful now. Do you work on that? Do you have any relation to it?
I mean, maybe I don't work on work specifically in such a context of me contemplating it as an archival piece, but in some ways also yes, like video and photography documentation of mostly my circus company, the Velvet Creepers, and also a collective I'm part of called Lunacy. And I find it important in a lot of ways because I think of certain artists, like I'm really, really inspired by Anita Berber and Sebastian Drost, who were artists from the 1920s in Berlin, and they were very like in the underground and lived really crazy lives and were really extreme and beautiful what they did in their art form. But there's no archival of their work, or very, very, very little. And sure, it was at different times of like how you could archive work, but the only like bigger piece that they have that is archival is this book that they wrote. And it's a book, and it's not describing their performance, but it's like kind of like poetry, and each poem is kind of supposed to represent what their piece was as a performance. And I really love this like concept or idea of not maybe describing a performance or trying to like record it exactly, but more trying to have an archival of it in a context that is a bit different, because of course you can never recreate a performance. A live performance is a live performance. You can't recreate it, but you can archive it in another way, and just trying to change format, I think, is really interesting. And so I'm trying to do that more in my work now, although I'm not sure how much I am actually successfully doing this, but at least having the thought of trying to like archive things in a different context than what it is, I think is really interesting.
Hello. Yeah. I can talk also from personal, personal point of view. For me, all my work is literally archive, because even like what I'm gonna perform like tonight, I play songs from 18 years that I wrote to 3 months ago, So, and that's actually part of my also experience for performance, because I relive things and have another perspective, sometimes coming back for old flares and feelings and things. So I feel like if we talk about archive, I think for me, just my performance itself is archive already, because I'm collecting everything and reflecting on it, So just from personal point of view.
Sí, yo también quisiera hablar desde un punto de mi práctica personal, y creo que justo volviendo a mis comentarios medio hater anteriores, creo que, bueno, a mí me interesa el archivo en general siempre, casi todo lo que hago tiene que ver con archivo propio o que descargo de internet, de páginas de libre acceso de archivo. Lo que vamos a hacer esta noche con Candi son archivos descargados de páginas de libre acceso de internet. Pero por el otro lado también, como en una visión medio radical, hace un tiempo hice justo una performance en donde usaba la mínima cantidad de luz posible, de manera tal que no se podía registrar, y eso fue una decisión de que solamente la vieran las personas que estaban presentes y que no hubiera posibilidad de registro, y era como una especie de statement al respecto. Y me pareció interesante en aquel momento. Digo, no sé si lo volvería a hacer porque a veces quisiera verlo y ya no hay registro, pero me parecía interesante justo pensarlo desde ese lugar, ¿no? Como de que no era para la foto ni para el registro, sino que simplemente para las personas que estaban ahí, que eran, no sé, 30 o 40 personas. Y sabiendo que con tan poca luz no se iba a poder registrar, me parecía como una linda decisión. En aquel momento me pareció una linda decisión.
Yeah, Lauri's saying basically how she's been always interested in archive, even from personal things to like internet free stuff, but also like how she once did a performance that it wasn't able to be documented, and how that just created this interest for her to have created an undocumented performance.
En cuanto a lo que dice Lauri, estoy familiarizado, o no familiarizado, sino que estoy como un poco con la misma opinión. Muchas veces pienso como la importancia del performance, de presenciarlo tal cual en vivo. No sé si es algo romántico o una visión más anticuada, pero también como que me conflictó un poco el registro de la performance tal cual en video, ¿no? Y esto también por lo funcional que siento que es, y obviamente es algo muy importante para el trabajo en cuanto a lo mercantil, ¿no? A cómo uno vende o presenta su trabajo para que sea consumible, ¿no? y cómo se edita para que sea consumible ese trabajo. Y por otro lado, concuerdo un poco con Fifi, es muy interesante y divertido para mí poder pensar en ese archivo traducido, ¿no? Hacia otros medios, otros formatos. Eso para mí es algo que también estoy explorando hace poco y me parece fascinante. Pero sí, como tal cual el registro no sé si me interesa como preservar tal cual una obra, ¿no? No sé si tiene como algún sentido para mí, ¿no? Pensando también de que quién decidió que es algo importante preservar las cosas, ¿no? O sea, como toda esta idea de lo museístico y de, claro, del legado, ¿no? O de el patrimonio, como que eso es lo que medio me glitchea. Pero eso a grandes rasgos.
Yeah, and so Ricardo is basically also sharing how, you know, with having a similar opinion to Lauri's, but also maybe having, you know, this like romantic vision of like thinking performance as something merely or purely live, and so questioning how do we edit video of a performance? How is that possible? How is the archive translated into these other formats? And sort of also not sure if he's interested in preserving art or like conflicted in the ways that this exists, or how the archive is just thought of these days.
I also feel social media right now is archiving a lot of our live presence, and even when a performance is happening, there's even a live streaming of the actual performance thing, so it's kind of doubling the performance. So you're alive in so many different mediums at the same time. You're in the real one, in the simulated one, in the simulated of the simulacra one, I don't know. Then there's the stories of other people, so there's the perception of other people of you performing. So every time after a performance, I was like, it's so much fun to see the other angles. So in a way, the social media documents your life presence, because the body is the most precious thing right now and becomes the most precious thing. Like, oh, it's a live body, it's breathing, it's alive, it's warm. So that's already being captured by even the satellite, maybe, you know. So it's so crazy if you think about it, what's happening right now. And yeah, I mean, to have a proper video with good quality, with proper editing, I don't think a lot of us have time for it, to be honest, because we're constantly working on something else. So it takes you maybe double amount of time of preparing a performance and to actually properly document it, because if you don't do it yourself, then you need someone to do it. So again, another way of funding and blah, blah. So it's insane. Like, I don't know, a lot of performance artists end up not really editing their performances. They only have like half an hour long video that just ends up on a hard drive, honestly. So this is the reality, actually. And I'm confronted with it every day because I end up with piles and piles. So I hope the artificial intelligence will edit my videos in the way that I train it to do it. So I want to train the AI to edit videos.
Ana.
¿Ya? Bueno, yo para mí sí. O sea, para mí sí es súper importante el archivo. No me voy a hacer como que la que no. Sí es súper importante dentro de mi proceso creativo. Cada vez es mucho más importante, cada vez es mucho más seductora la idea de generar un archivo, de identificar, de pensar cuáles van a ser esos medios que soporten ese archivo, qué tipo de lenguajes. Últimamente estoy como muy clavada con el dibujo y casi siempre mis piezas creativas empiezan desde ese lugar. Entonces sí, para mí es definitivamente importante el archivo, más allá de que si la preservación del arte y cuáles son los usos de esa preservación, para mí definitivamente es importante por los usos que yo le doy. Comentaba antes que uno de mis procesos creativos, dentro de mis procesos creativos, uno de los momentos de inspiración tiene que ver justo con eso, ¿no? Con la revisión del archivo de otros artistas, o sea, la idea de vaciar, que decía Vivi, que me gustó mucho, la idea de vaciarme un poco a través del consumo, del archivo de otras personas, artistas, banda dramaturga, etcétera, es súper importante y en términos también de lo que yo hago, pues sí, es definitivamente importante para mí la idea de poder acceder a eso que hice en el pasado o en el pasado, quiero decir, corto plazo, largo plazo, e identificarme o poder observarme a través del tiempo, a través de ese archivo, me parece bien rico e importante. ¿Y qué más? Pues eso, sí, creo que muy importante para mí como ese sustrato matérico de lo que hago, porque si bien sabemos todos que lo que hacemos es como una cosa súper efímera, de qué manera yo también puedo acceder a eso que estoy creando, pues es a través de ese archivo que genero, de poder editar, de poder reanalizar, ser autocrítica con lo que hago. Creo que el archivo para mí en ese sentido es como un soporte súper importante, súper valioso.
Anna is basically saying like kind of disagreeing with I mean with the idea that it's not important archive. Like I think she says that basically it is super important archive, but also inside her creative processes. It's more and more important and it grows. It's growing this like importance of like, you know, what media and formats are going to be supported by these archival sort of like, you know, beyond preserving, but it's also the uses that she gives it to it. Like how does she uses this material for her own, but also the idea of like emptying herself by consuming other artists' archive, and how it is important for her to access her own practice and to look at her own identity within what she has created recently or in a long time. You know, to have access to look at that, to what she has done, to have and feel all of this like matter of her own.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Anna. I also use my own archive of work to work on my performance, like going back and seeing old pieces that I've done or something that I want to take and renew to something new. And so using an archive to kind of like further develop my performance. I use it as a tool basically every time that I'm creating, also within video, of like taking video and reflecting on it. So I think it is really like an important thing for us to have, not only in terms of other people's work and interest in other people's work, but also in reflecting in our own identity and how it is shifted and molded in performance.
Well, I think we're... Oh, wait, yeah,
No, que pensaba, escuchando hablar a las demás y también revisando lo que dije, que creo que hay una diferencia, o por lo menos para mí, en el archivo personal y cómo lo usamos para hacer lo que hacemos, que por lo menos en mi práctica es todo lo que hago, revisar mi archivo para atrás y bueno, y también los archivos de otra. Y otra cosa es la decisión de cómo se va a filmar realmente, o sea, cómo se va a registrar la performance. O sea, una cosa es usar, filmar tus ensayos, filmarte, no sé, lo que sea que estás haciendo y eso catalogarlo y guardarlo bien y no sé, o como cada quien quiera, con lo que no solo estoy de acuerdo, sino que es casi que todo lo que hago y me encanta revisar archivos y ver el paso del tiempo y todo. Y otra cosa creo que es la decisión que se toma al momento de registrar la performance propiamente dicha, o sea, en el momento performático. No sé, pensaba eso, que son dos cosas como diferentes, ¿no? Que por eso yo hice el comentario este de la baja luz para los que estaban ahí. O sea, todo el registro de lo que hice para ahí lo tengo totalmente filmado, solo que en el momento de la performance decidí que el registro no era importante. Ya para cerrar, lo prometo. Pero creo que a veces
¿Qué? Ah, ¿quieres traducir, Ale? O termino, porque tiene que ver con lo que acaba de decir Lau.
No,
Entonces,
dale.
sí. O sea, como que creo que también, en términos de lo que dice Lau, como haciendo esta diferenciación entre un registro audiovisual que tiene que ver más con capturar un momento performático que es efímero, a diferencia de un trabajo de archivo que tiene que ver más con una memoria que está ahí, que utilizas más desde un lugar creativo, creo que de pronto pueden un poco emborrecerse las líneas, porque a ti misma te ha pasado, o sea, como que Lauri tiene una pieza que se llama Aerobics, y tienes todo una serie de videos que estaban grabados para revisar, editar tu trabajo de ensayos, por ejemplo, pero después todo ese archivo se convirtió en tu obra. Entonces, en ese sentido, creo que es rico también identificar la idea de archivo como una cosa que no es estática, ¿no? En términos de, hay mucho material audiovisual, de escritura, de dibujo, etcétera, que muchas veces no preservas o no guardas pensando directamente en que este material va a funcionar o va a tomar el cuerpo de archivo, pero que quizás después en un futuro toma ese lugar. Entonces, para mí también en mi práctica artística me he dado cuenta de la importancia que tiene el archivo porque naturalmente también ha pasado o me he encontrado en este tipo de situaciones en donde tengo una serie de videos, etcétera, que ahora me están sirviendo o están haciendo parte de mis procesos creativos y que cuando los registré, los grabé, los materialicé, definitivamente no los tenía pensados o proyectados para que ocuparan ese lugar. ¿Se entiende lo que digo?
I think what Lauri and Anna are discussing is basically, like the creation of your personal archive within your own work and your universe and your practice, and sort of the ideas and the references, inspiration, the things, the writings, the drawings, the things that you sort of create around your practice, in your making of art, and how that informs what you're doing, and how that also might have ripple effects of what comes after for future works, and et cetera. And then the difference of that kind of archive to the archive of a like documentation of a performance, and how the documentation of the performance, might be also useful or not, or you might want to have it or not, or you might just also want to have the performance as a simple action that just happens without any documentation, and then it only being a live thing that only the people that were present experiences, and how these are also different from each other as thinking of archival. Well, thank you so much. I think we're literally beyond the 90 minutes that we have been sharing together. I mean, I just want to give a closure to these. I think it's interesting. I think, sort of this, maybe I just pose this last question if you want to add, but I think we're all like existing within this streaming of performance and thinking performance as a video thing, how it exists in video. We also had presented Perform Vue earlier this month during Art Week in Mexico City, which is a platform that it's now streaming performance online and allowing performance artists to show their work on an online format through video. And so, maybe as a closure, I'm just asking you if any of you would like to share what's your personal feeling, your personal view on like streaming performance online and making video performance, or even thinking of virtual reality, and if performance would now, or have you even thought about it as a virtual experience? That's my closing question. And if you want to add, and we can continue as long as we want, but I think I don't want to take more time of you guys. Thank you.
I think it can literally like open a little like can of worms, if we start to talk about the streaming performances, because clearly, all of artists were put in this situation during Corona. So I think a lot of people use this tool actually to perform, to use, including me. had a couple performances which were like done that way and with audience separately or streaming. For me, it was very interesting personally because I never did. And it gave me a little bit also kind of security, but also because also the way I work, I like to create my bubble and people peeking into it basically instead of like just giving it to them. So for me, it was an interesting process. And actually Corona was an interesting time to work around this idea of people peeking through the hall, literally peep show. That's actually what was happening basically. So yeah, I would say in certain times and moments, this is like an interesting tool to use. It's not personally my preference actually, because I like to also have a feeling of the room, people in the space and things. But I think specifically during Corona, we were all put in that kind of situation to explore that, you know.
Ok, claro, a partir de la pandemia, en nuestra práctica grupal en Entresuelo, esta práctica corporal de entrenamiento sobre la improvisación que teníamos, tuvimos que hacerla vía streaming, ¿no? Y al principio cuando empezamos a hacerlo, era literalmente una clase de danza de improvisación guiada por una persona, entonces había 20 cuerpos al mismo tiempo moviéndose, ¿no? Frente a la cámara, con música. Y por alguna razón, todas coincidimos en que no era como una buena idea, ¿no? No teníamos como el mismo feeling de obviamente las sesiones presenciales, ¿no? Entonces decidimos cambiar o mudar esta práctica corporal a un formato distinto, a la plataforma de Google Docs, para ser específicos, y pensando como en la realidad virtual, pensaba en esta práctica que comenzó en 2020 y que realmente duró esa parte, ¿no? Ese momento solamente. Y era justo como poder improvisar, poder pensar como bailarines a partir del documento, estando estos 5 o 10 cuerpos simultáneamente en el documento, ¿no? Y a partir de eso, pues creamos exploraciones muy interesantes y tal vez, y lo pongo como ejemplo solamente como para, pues no sé, como repensar como esa interacción de esta nueva realidad virtual, ¿no? Que claro, después de la pandemia fuerte, este formato más vía Zoom, pues yo realmente lo abandoné, ¿no? Y no es más que una práctica funcional hasta ahora. Pero quería compartir eso. No sé si tenga que ver mucho con la pregunta.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Ricardo is basically sharing how this both practice had to be done via streaming when in the pandemic, of the literally having a dance class in front of a camera. And like for a reason, everybody that was participating in this all coincided that it wasn't the same. And so they actually moved on to using text, Google Docs document as a file to to be all together and join in this text, and how they will be improvising as dancers coming from the idea of having a text that would be shared.
For me personally, I didn't have a lot of experience performing online. I did have a couple during the pandemic because it was the only way. Performances being rescheduled to go online. So performance that was supposed to be live was then rescheduled to go online. And in a way, it was their way to make it happen. So this was the only experience I had. And to be honest, it was not a very great one. The same as just basically, it's not even performing for a camera, because I feel performing for a camera has another legacy in itself. Like when you are performing for a camera, you're set into the mood, but you're performing for an audience and not for the camera. And at the same time, it's also the streaming mechanism, which I feel also can distort a little bit, because most of it just goes through a computer, and it just, I don't know, it just doesn't look very good, right? I mean, it's the quality of the video is not that great. So if you're performing for a camera, then you can organize it in a different way, and it's something like a set. It's like doing set photography or set performance, which a lot of artists have done in the 70s, also in Romania, when performance art was not allowed, and they were doing a lot of land art and performance art in the public spaces. Yes, I really hope that we're going to keep the legacy of performing live, honestly, and because it's just the transfer, the human being a conductor of energy, the energy that flows through you, and you give something that it's just impossible. It's just impossible to recreate. Also, I want to thank Alex for inviting me to be part of this. I'm going to have to go now. And I was really happy to get to meet you all and share all this. And yeah, thank you very much. And yeah.
Yeah, I think we could actually end this session. I'm really sad to say goodbye to all of you too, but I mean, thank you so much for participating. And we'll just keep this conversation going in the future. And I'm sure that we can make more bridges between Berlin and Mexico City, sharing about how we are keeping performance alive. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you all. Ciao.
Bye.
Gracias.
Bye.
Un abrazo,
Bye.
todos.
Besos, besos, besos con baba.